Over the period since the 1st of September, you can see a steady, sustained rise in numbers with a doubling time, as with the cases, of probably 7 or 8 days. Now, what that tells us is that if this carried on unabated, these numbers are relatively small. We're talking about around 200 at the moment. But if we continued along the path that Patrick laid out, the number of deaths directly from COVID, I'll come back to indirect deaths, will continue to rise, potentially on an exponential curve. That means doubling and doubling and doubling again. And you can quickly move from really quite small numbers to really very large numbers because of that exponential process. So we have, in a bad sense, literally turned a corner, although only relatively recently. So we should see this as a 6-month problem that we have to deal with collectively. It's not indefinite, and as I come on to, science will in due course ride to our rescue. But in this period of the next 6 months, I think we have to realise that we have to take this collectively very seriously. And what we've seen in other countries and are now clearly seeing here is that they're not staying just in the younger age groups, they're moving up the age bands, and the mortality rates will be similar to, slightly lower than they were previously, but they will be similar to what we saw previously. And these are significantly greater, for example, than ordinary seasonal flu. So, and therefore, ministers making decisions and all of society have to walk this very difficult balance. If we do too little, this virus will go out of control and we will get significant numbers of increased direct and indirect deaths. But if we go too far the other way, then we can cause damage to the economy, which can feed through to unemployment, to poverty, to deprivation, all of which have long-term health effects. So we need always to keep these two sides in mind. A lot of people say, well, can't people just be allowed to take their own risk? The problem with a pandemic or an epidemic infection like this is if I as an individual increase my risk, I increase the risk to everyone around me and then everyone who's a contact to theirs. And sooner or later, the chain will meet people who are vulnerable or elderly or have a long-term problem from COVID. So you cannot, in an epidemic, just take your own risk. Unfortunately, you're taking a risk on behalf of everybody else. It's important that we see this as something we have to do collectively.